We're back now, joined by our roundtable, NBC News White House correspondent, co-host of MSNBC's The Daily Rundown, Savannah Guthrie, editorial page editor of the Wall Street Journal, Paul Gigot, Democratic Congressman from New York, Anthony Weiner, and former Congressman from Tennessee, Democrat Harold Ford. Welcome to all of you. We've talked about the substance. We've talked about the impact on the economy. I do want to talk about the politics of tax cuts this week and the president's difficulties with his liberal base. Savannah Guthrie, really something extraordinary on Friday. President Clinton comes to meet with President Obama. They meet privately, presumably to get some advice. And then a funny thing happens on the way to the exit, and that is they find their way into the briefing room. And watching this scene unfold was great Washington theater. Here was a portion of it.
I'm going to let him speak very briefly, and then I've actually got to go over and do just one more Christmas party. He may decide he wants to take some questions, but I want to make sure that you guys heard from him directly.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you very much, Mr. President. First of all, I feel awkward being here, and now you're going to leave me all by myself.
Here's what I'll say is I've been keeping the First Lady waiting for about half an hour, so I'm going to take off.
And I don't want to make her mad. Please go.
You're in good hands, and Gibbs will call last question.
Yeah, help me. Thank you. Yeah, go ahead.
Savannah Guthrie, what I love is that I didn't sense the awkwardness that Bill Clinton felt or that he expressed.
Yeah.
What was behind that, and what good did it do them, do they think?
Well, it may not surprise you, having watched that this was not something that was planned over a series of days. This was as ad hoc as it gets. In fact, when the two presidents came down to the press briefing room, they found it locked, had to go back, were wandering around trying to get into the briefing room. They ran into Press Secretary Gibbs, and they said, "We're looking to talk to some reporters." And he said, "Give me 5 minutes." Look, they had this meeting. It was long scheduled. The president had called President Clinton after the midterms to express his thanks for what he'd done in the campaigns. They scheduled this meeting. Frankly, until they had this meeting, the White House and White House aides weren't 100% sure where former President Clinton stood on the tax deal. Having met in the Oval Office 90 minutes, the two presidents decided amongst themselves to come out and do this news conference. And I think, especially in a week in which the left wing of the party was so disappointed with the president, to have this former president considered the most successful Democratic president in modern history come out and ratify the deal, validate it. Right. They felt it was well worth it.
Congressman Weiner, look, he was speaking to you. I mean, you have been outspoken in your opposition to this tax compromise. And to have the president, the former president up there to synthesize the deal, to make the case for it, this is in part what he said to opponents like yourself.
Look, if we had 5% growth and unemployment was dropping like a rock, maybe you could have a so-called Mexican standoff, and you could say, it'll be you, not me. The voters will hold responsible for raising taxes on middle-class people if they all go down, next year. That is not the circumstance we face.
His point, this is not the time to fight in the way that you wanted the president to.
Well, since he officiated at my wedding, I think I'm constitutionally prohibited from disagreeing with him. But one of the things that President Clinton being there reminded us is the difference in the attitude that the White House took with the Gingrich Congress when he was there. He stood up and fought for the values of the Democratic Party, fought for what we cared for, and made the Congress, the Republican-led Congress, the reason that the country came to a standstill with the government shutdown. Look, many of us have been saying that we want the president to succeed, and it's simply a question of this. In these times when the middle class is under so much pressure, when debt is approaching $14 trillion, can we really afford to give millionaires a $160,000 tax cut? That's really the big question here. And I think that now you saw Mr. Goolsbee, the president, even President Clinton, all agree that the answer is no, yet that doesn't seem to be the fight that we had in Washington.
In the end, do you vote against this?
Well, I think the entire House of Representatives and the Democratic side has said we're not going for this deal. I believe in a couple of things. One, we have to get something done to make sure the taxes go down on the middle class. And two, it has to be done quickly. So now we're doing our job in Congress. We're going to change this, and we're going to, hopefully the president is going to back us up as we try to take out the worst things that are in it.
Congressman, how do you see it?
This position that Anthony's taking is the one that was rejected on November 2nd. As much as I believe that all taxes should go up on every American to some small extent, we're dealing with a different Congress and a different reality. In comparison to President Clinton, when he lost in '94, remember, unemployment was not at 10%. The kind of whipping that we took as Democrats in the Congress was not as large and as grave as it was just a few weeks ago. I think the president should lean more into this agreement. We got everything we wanted. We got the cuts for the middle class. We got a payroll tax cut. We got an acceleration of business tax cuts. We even have extended some of the other tax cuts that the president wanted. And in addition, 13 months of unemployment compensation. The only thing that we added was the cuts for the top earners. Now, that's less than a quarter of the spending. If you look at the bulk of the spending, the additional debt spending here, the majority of it is for the middle class cuts, which I support. Now, if we had 65 votes in the Senate, 300 in the House, I think Anthony's point would be the one that would be followed. But President Clinton said it very well. This is no time for a Mexican standoff. The challenges we face are grave. The agreement reached by this president and Republicans is a good one. It could have been worse. And frankly, I think the president should be prouder of it and use different language to support
Paul
it.
Gigot, the question is to you, does this signal an actual shift in the president's philosophy about what's going to make the economy work again?
Well, they're saying no shift. However, implicitly, it is a shift. I love the symbolism of two Democratic presidents, not one, but two, endorsing Bush tax cuts, saying we need them crucially to help the economy. The president, I think, is implicitly admitting that tax rates matter. After a couple years, as you showed with the discussion with Austin Goolsbee and Tim Geithner had said, they don't matter. Now they're saying, yes, they do matter, and implicitly admitting that tax cuts matter more for growth than spending. And it makes you wonder, why didn't they do this 2 years ago?
Mm-hmm. Congressman, you heard from Mayor Bloomberg. To the left, the president should say, suck it up. You got to take the longer view here. I gather that doesn't sit well with you.
No, it depends on what your philosophy is. I'm not a member of the tail between my legs wing of the Democratic Party. I believe we still fight for the things we care about. And
you
I
think
believe
the president is?
Well, here's what I will say. This is not a fringe element of the debate that's going on in the last 10 years. This is the very crux of it. The middle class is getting crushed, while the very well-to-do have done remarkably, remarkably well. You know, I did a little math on the back of an envelope here on the way in. 3% of the beneficiaries of the tax cuts are going to get 38% of the cash. It's just not fair. And also something else. You know, you cannot say you are concerned about the debt and the deficit and support giving giant tax cuts on the estate, on estates of billionaires, or giant tax cuts to millionaires. It's just inconsistent. So I believe you fight for the values. And today, we're the majority in the House, the majority in the Senate, and we control the presidency, and we're acting like we have a weak hand. We have the right side of the issues and the numbers, and I don't know why we don't fight
It's a question
more.
of timing, Savannah, too. Why it is the president put himself in this position to have to negotiate out of such weakness, and what's going to be different in 2012, another political year, for him to think that he's going to be able to prevail in this argument?
Well, on the latter question, you heard Austin Goolsbee basically make the argument. We think the economy will be in a better position. They are banking everything on that because they think they'll be able to say, look, now we can afford to see those tax rates rise on the wealthiest Americans. One of the most potent arguments against letting those wealthiest Americans' tax cuts expire on the Republican side was it will imperil the recovery. You can never raise tax in a recession. I think the president has not backed off his position of being against the tax cuts, rolling back the tax cuts for the wealthiest. I think the point is he's staring at the barrel of a gun. These tax rates are going up in January, and he's not going to take that gamble, and that's why he made this deal. The question is, 6 months ago, why didn't Democrats in the House force this issue? Why didn't they make it a campaign issue, as some liberal members of the caucus wanted to?
Yeah. So Democrats probably should have done that, and I supported them doing that. But Paul, in fairness, you all wrote a great editorial, and it was funny in some ways, saying that President Bush should have been on the panel, been up there with Presidents Obama and Clinton. The reality is, one of the reasons we're in the mess that we're in is that we passed the Medicare prescription drug plan without paying for it, which President Bush did. You wouldn't ask them to be up on the panel on that one. We are fighting two wars. We have not paid for them as much as they're noble causes and noble ends to. And I got to think we're going to have a strategic reassessment of whether or not Afghanistan should continue. But President Obama has a unique opportunity now to reduce the debt. I hope the Wall Street Journal and others will ask the Paul Ryans of the world, will ask the Jeb Henslings of the world to support responsible tax increases and responsible spending cuts. You cannot be for just cutting spending and not raising taxes at some level. I think this president might have had a stronger hand had he just said, we're going to raise taxes on everybody and I'm going to stand firm. But since he chose not to do that, which I'm glad he did not, right, I think it's the right thing to do, and I think that Anthony and others will come around.
Well, let me
and find a way
quickly, and then I want to get a break in, Paul.
Yeah.
What about, Peter Orzag's point, which is all of these tax cuts are simply unaffordable, and in 2 years they ought to all go away.
No, I don't agree with that. I think, look, I'd love to see a larger tax reform.
Right, which the president has talked about wanting to do.
All this deal really does is extend the status quo. So that's not terrific. It's going to help avoid a huge hit to the economy in 2011, and that's good. But I'd love to see a larger reform. Maybe both parties can get together on that, and maybe that's the kind of debate we'll have going into 2012.
All right, I want to take a break here. I want to come back and ask two very, pointed questions. Is there something of a war between the president and the left, given his comments this week? And what does this deal say about the next couple of years in Washington in terms of bipartisanship? More from our roundtable after this quick break. We're back with more from our roundtable because they just keep talking even during the break. You got to hear all of this. Congressman Weiner, to hear the president say it this week, he is irritated with liberals in his party. And as he talked about this deal and he talked about the criticism on the left, he said it was like a return to the debate over health care and the public option. And his point was, look, I could have stuck to my guns on that, and then we wouldn't have had health care reform at all. Listen to how he put it.
So this notion that somehow we are willing to compromise too much reminds me of the debate that we had during health care. This is the public option debate all over again. And we will be able to feel good about ourselves and sanctimonious about how pure our intentions are and how tough we are. And in the meantime, the American people are still seeing themselves not able to get health insurance because of pre-existing condition.
That's his view. In Congress this week, you were leading a chant that said, no, we can't, not yes, we can. This is a real standoff.
Well, first of all, I wasn't leading any such chant. But look, let me just say this, that the president has to understand that critique that he gets from his base and his supporters who want him to succeed is fundamentally different from the one they get from Mitch McConnell. We're trying to help him be successful, and I kind of agree with him. This is like the public option. If he would have fought harder for that, we would have had it. I think that the president needs to understand that there's an enormous number of us who are just waiting to be called to kind of really have this competition of ideas. We really need to have this contest. And, look, he made a deal. It doesn't necessarily mean it's a great one. We in Congress now have it. We're trying to improve upon it. But we're on his team. That's the fundamental difference he needs to understand. When he calls us sanctimonious and says this is like past debates, the only reason that it's like past debates is we still want him to be the president that we elected. And we're going to help him do that. And if he digs in and he fights for these values, he's going to find the American people support it, and we, his supporters, are really going to rally to his side.
Harold, the question was this a sister soldier moment, to go back to the Clinton era, for President Obama, standing up to the base?
Look, I think it's a moment where he's standing up for Americans and standing up for jobs. I like Anthony and respect him a lot, but to suggest that the president doesn't fight a lot, we had a fight and we had an outcome declared on November 2nd. Now, he has fought and fought and fought and frankly has given Democrats in the Congress the ball to run every time. Unfortunately, the American people, whether it's a communications problem, and I don't think it is, it's hard to communicate effectively. We have 9.8% unemployment and have people rally around you. The reality is we've done that before. The president's move last week was an important move for the American people. And at the end of the day, if unemployment begins to drop over the next quarter or two by a quarter point, every Democrat, including Anthony and others, will say this was the right thing to do. Now we have to look at the next step in reducing the debt and ensuring that we create more jobs.
What does this say about how this president wants to do business in Washington over the next couple of years?
Well, what's fascinating about this is I don't know that there was a ton of strategy going into this. I think, again, it was dictated by circumstances. They had to make a deal. They felt they had to. But perhaps they stumbled upon a strategy, which is to draw out the partisans on both sides and stake out this middle ground. And that news conference on Tuesday was so remarkable in the sense that it seemed to me to be the most authentic view of President Obama we've seen. This seemed to me to be the closest approximation of the man behind closed doors, being forceful and compelling. But interestingly, all that fight, all that vim and vigor was directed toward the left of his own party. And you can see that he's incredibly frustrated by that. It's almost as though he thinks Republicans, well, gosh, I expect them to oppose me. But where's the love? Why aren't Democrats, why isn't the left in my own party supporting me when I'm out there bleeding on things like health care, things that have been articles of faith in the Democratic Party for years?
One conservative who's been talked a lot about, the Washington Post's Charles Krauthammer, the columnist, who apparently the White House loves now, at least this week, because he wrote the following, which is much more complimentary of Obama and where he's going the next couple of years. He writes this: at great cost that will have to be paid after the newest free lunch, this package will add as much as 1% to GDP and lower the unemployment rate by about 1.5 percentage points. That could easily be the difference between victory and defeat in 2012. Obama's no fool, he writes. While getting Republicans to boost his re-election chances, he gets to them to make a mockery of their newfound second chance post-Bush Tea Party, this time with serious persona of debt-averse fiscal responsibility.
That's a little overstated, but I think Charles is right that this is a victory for the president. I mean, it's going to help the economy by not having a huge tax increase. I don't think it's going to be that great a stimulus, but the economy right now has some momentum. This makes sure that we're not going to stop that momentum and send the economy back into recession. But on when it comes to, so it is going to help them, no question about it. Also going to help Republicans, though, honor a campaign promise. So they get to do that. But I'll tell you, there are a lot of Republicans who aren't thrilled with this deal because they had to give up a lot, and they'd love to see the House Democrats defeat this, because they'll come back in January and say, we'll clean up the mess, you'll be responsible for the tax increase, we'll get a better deal for our voters.
But it's also the only things the Republicans really wanted coming out of this campaign. We know what they're against. They're against health care. They're against a lot of things the Democrats did the last couple of years. The only things they really wanted, they now got. They've got them. So where does the leverage come now? You know, the estate tax was going to lapse in January. It's going to go down. But that's where the leverage ultimately was for the president on that. We gave away that and then some. The only question
he needed to do that to get some of the other tax
But
cuts.
here's the thing, I just want to make sure we understand this. Every one of the economists the president rolled out and supported this plan, every one of them said the tax cuts on the upper brackets and the estate tax do virtually zero on the stimulus side to add to that growth. Those were the giveaways to the Republicans. And the question is this: when did the fight happen? Did the full-throated fight happen? Harold is 100% wrong if you think it happened during the campaign. The president gave a grand total of one speech in October in Ohio where he even mentioned it. Between the time of the State of the Union and the election, this our primary point of difference with the Republicans is the priorities. We defend the middle class, they defend the rich, and we effectively backed away from that fight.
Anthony, your position was defeated roundly November 2nd. I'm a Democrat. I'm a proud Democrat, but more importantly, I'm a proud American. The president, for the first time in the eyes of many Americans, particularly independents who voted for him, he said, you know what, we're going to strike a deal. I got everything I wanted. I don't know of anything in this tax deal that we didn't get as Democrats that we wanted. And what did he do? He extended the cuts for the top earners. Now, remember, we lost an election. If we had gained 60 seats, then what you're saying, you wouldn't have to be here. There'd be a huge agreement, broad agreement around what you're saying. The reality is the big winners yesterday and the day before and the day before that are the American people, because government is working again.
Savannah, 20 seconds. Has the president redefined himself? Is there a pragmatism about his politics now that we see over the next couple of years?
Well, I'll say this. Aides say he's always been this guy. Remember, back in the primary.
It's not how he's been seen, though.
Correct. But on the left, they liked Edwards. That was their candidate, not Barack Obama. And once he became the nominee, aides say, look, people projected all manner of things on him. They say he's just being true to who he is, progressive, pragmatist, and that's the president you'll see.
All right, we are going to leave it there. Thank all of you for a heated discussion, interesting discussion.